Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping right into a bit of a garden mystery, one you've actually brought to us. It sounds like your Aunt Green's got some tiny, fluttery guests in her greenhouse.
That's right. And Kesser and Steen are apparently on the case, trying to figure out exactly what these things are.
Yeah, it sounds like a classic greenhouse puzzle. So the first thing they noticed was these little white flies kind of buzzing around the windows.
Exactly. And Kesser, being Kesser, apparently rigged up one of his homemade fly traps and actually caught a few, so they knew it was something they needed to look into.
Good for him. So they're playing detective. Now, usually when there's a garden problem, they'd head straight for the man in the green shirt, right? He's their usual go-to.
He is, yeah. They're sort of resident expert. But plot twist, he's actually on holiday this time.
Ah, okay. So no usual guru available. What happens then?
Well, luckily there's a substitute stepping in. Someone new, described as really enthusiastic, very helpful, name's Glitter Fang.
Glitter Fang. Okay, that definitely sounds energetic. A different vibe, maybe.
Seems like it. Suggests we might get a perhaps more dynamic explanation for these greenhouse flies.
All right, so Kesser and Steen have got their observations. They found Glitter Fang. What's her initial take based on what the boys told her?
Well, one detail really stood out to her from their description. They mentioned the flies were, and I quote, chilling near the leaf veins.
Chilling near the leaf veins.
Okay. And for Glitter Fang, that specific behavior was a big clue. It strongly suggested they were dealing with whiteflies.
Whiteflies. Got it. Now, I remember reading that these little guys can sometimes be confused with other pests like mealybugs. Can you clarify what we're actually looking at here?
Absolutely. It's a common point of confusion.
Yeah.
So the description we have fits whiteflies well. Tiny, maybe 1 to 2 millimeters long, yellowish bodies, and importantly, 4 wings covered in this white waxy powder.
They're wings. Okay.
And they hold them almost flat, sort of parallel to the leaf surface. Now, you mentioned mealybugs. Some adult mealybugs do develop 2 white wings and get called whiteflies sometimes, confusingly.
Right.
But they're actually more related to aphids. Both suck sap, that's true. But the key visual difference is that true adult whiteflies, the ones we think are in the greenhouse, have those 2 pairs of white-covered wings.
Right. So 4 wings total for the true whiteflies. That's a helpful distinction. So assuming it is these 4-winged whiteflies, what's their lifestyle like? Where do they prefer to, hang out in the greenhouse?
They're quite specific, actually. The adults really like the undersides of the newest leaves, usually right up near the top of the plant.
Makes sense. Freshest growth there.
Exactly. It's prime real estate for feeding and also for laying their eggs. Then, if you look further down the plant, on the older leaves, that's where you're more likely to find the larvae and the pupa, the less mobile stages.
And are they active all the time, or do they have a schedule?
They're definitely day trippers. Active during the daylight hours, that's when they do their feeding and egg laying.
Okay, so they pick their spots, but do they stay put, or do they spread around the greenhouse? How does an infestation get going?
They aren't exactly long-distance flyers, but the adults definitely move around. They'll fly from plant to plant, and that's how they colonize new areas,
Right.
pretty effectively within a closed space, like a greenhouse.
And how do they feed again? You mentioned sap sucking.
Yeah, they have this specialized mouth part, a proboscis.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it like a tiny, sharp straw they use to pierce the plant tissue, usually the veins, and suck out the sap.
Okay. And what about making more whiteflies? How fast is that process?
It's pretty quick, actually. Females can start laying eggs just a day or 2 after they become adults.
Wow, okay.
And those eggs hatch fast, too, maybe in 4 or 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
The first little larval stage can actually crawl around a bit before it settles down to feed. And interestingly, some types can even give birth to live young, a bit like aphids do sometimes.
Live young, too. So they can really ramp up the population quickly. What's the whole cycle time, egg to adult?
In the summer, you're looking at roughly 3 to 4 weeks for the whole process.
Yeah.
And an adult whitefly might live for about 4 weeks itself.
And how many eggs can one female lay in that time?
Potentially up to 300 eggs. So you can see how the numbers build up. Of course, things like temperature and the type of plant they're on can affect this.
Right. Does temperature play a big role?
It does. Interestingly, unlike some other pests like spider mites, really high temperatures can actually be detrimental to whiteflies, increasing their mortality.
Okay, so they don't like it super hot. What about winter? How do they survive the cold in a greenhouse?
They don't really have a specific hibernation stage,
Yeah.
but they can definitely survive on bits of leftover plant debris in the greenhouse over winter.
Ah, so cleanup is important.
Very important. because even a small number surviving can lead to a big problem come spring. Or, they could hitch a ride in on new plants brought into the greenhouse.
Right, that makes sense. Now, the story takes an interesting turn here. There was another visitor mentioned a lacewing near the greenhouse door.
Yes, and Glitter Fang was apparently quite excited about this, because lacewings, especially their larvae, often called aphid lions, are fantastic predators.
Aphid lions, I like that.
They gobble up aphids, yes, but they also definitely eat whiteflies. So seeing a lacewing is potentially really good news, a natural enemy turning up.
That is good news for Aunt Green, but why would it just show up? Pure chance.
Probably not just chance. Glitterfang explained that plants under attack, like those being fed on by whiteflies, can release these airborne chemical signals, like a silent alarm.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's amazing. And beneficial insects, like lacewings, have evolved to pick up on these signals. So the lacewing might have literally smelled trouble, or rather smelled lunch, and come to investigate.
So the plants are basically sending out an SOS that attracts protectors. That's incredible.
It really is nature's own little defense network.
So what did Glitter Fang suggest Kesser and Steen do about this helpful lacewing? Just leave it be.
Her advice was pretty practical. If possible, gently try to encourage it further inside the greenhouse. And definitely, if they see more lacewings around the garden, try to catch them carefully and release them inside.
Actively recruit them, essentially.
Exactly. Bolster the natural defenses that are already showing up. It's about working with the ecosystem.
This idea of plants sending signals, Glitter Fang seemed quite keen on it. She called it a group text.
Yeah, it's a great analogy, isn't it? These volatile chemicals released by a damaged plant travel through the air, and neighboring plants can detect them.
And what happens when they detect them?
They can actually ramp up their own defenses. Maybe make their leaves taste worse, or produce other chemicals to deter the pests, or even release scents that attract more beneficial insects, like those lacewings.
So they're talking to each other, warning each other.
Pretty much. It shows they're not just passively sitting there, they're actively communicating and responding.
And didn't the source mention communication happening underground too? Something about roots.
Yes, absolutely. It's not just airborne signals. Roots can communicate as well, often through these amazing fungal networks in the soil, sometimes called the wood wide web.
The wood wide web, I've heard of that.
Right. These networks connect different plants, allowing them to share not just nutrients, but also warning signals about stress, like drought or pests.
It's like an underground internet for plants.
Kind of, yeah. So a warning can spread through the network, giving connected plants a heads up. Glitter Fang pointed out that even something simple like pruning can trigger these communication chains. It's all interconnected.
Which brings us back to Kesser and Steen. They have their own unique methods, right? Glitter Fang called it garden punk rock.
Yes. That was apparently her term for their bucket of weedy water that they keep in the garden.
A bucket of weedy water, okay.
Sounds a bit weird, maybe, but Glitter Fang was all for it. Apparently, it's a big draw for hoverflies.
Hoverflies, are they good guys too?
Oh, definitely. Hoverfly larvae are also voracious predators, especially of aphids. So having hoverflies around, plus the lacewings. Glitter Fang saw it as Kesser and Steen building a really strong natural pest control team.
So their slightly messy approach is actually good ecological gardening.
It seems so. That weedy water probably provides habitat or food for the hoverfly larvae. The adult hoverflies feed on pollen and nectar, so having things they like encourages them to stay and lay eggs.
Did Glitter Fang give them any other tips for attracting these beneficials, especially the lacewings?
Yeah, a few key things. First, and crucially, avoid spraying broad-spectrum pesticides, because those will kill the good bugs along with the bad.
Makes sense.
Then, plant flowers that adult lacewings like things with small flowers in clusters, like dill, fennel, coriander, yarrow. That provides nectar for the adults and encourages egg laying.
Okay, so specific plants help.
Right. And also, maybe leave some areas a bit wilder patches of longer grass or perennial herbs. These provide shelter and places for beneficial insects to overwinter. She even mentioned you can buy lacewing eggs to release.
Buy the eggs. Interesting. It sounds like Kesser and Steen were already doing some of this stuff, maybe without realizing the full extent of it.
Exactly. Glitter Fang was really impressed with their overall approach, seeing the garden as a whole system. She loved the fennel under the apple tree, great for hoverflies, and the yarrow they had, plus plans for more herbs.
So it's creating a welcoming habitat.
Precisely. a sort of five-star hotel and buffet for beneficial bugs. Seeing the lacewing show up was just confirmation that their efforts were starting to pay off, creating that natural balance. Plus, herbs smell great. You can cook with them. It adds a nice touch.
Absolutely. Beyond attracting predators, though, were there other preventative things mentioned or more direct biological controls for whiteflies?
Yeah, a couple of things. Flower cress Tropiolum majus was mentioned. Some gardeners find it helps keep whiteflies away in greenhouses.
Like a companion plant.
Sort of, yeah. And then Glitter Fang introduced them to a more targeted biological control, a tiny parasitic wasp called Encartia formosa.
A wasp. That sounds a bit scary for a greenhouse.
Oh, they're tiny, only about a millimeter long. And they're completely harmless to humans, but they are specialists when it comes to whiteflies. They've been used in commercial horticulture for ages.
Okay, so how does this tiny wasp control the whiteflies?
It's really clever.
Mm.
The female wasp lays her egg inside a whitefly larva.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The wasp larva then hatches and eats the whitefly larva from the inside out. Eventually, the wasp pupates right inside the dead whitefly shell, and a new adult wasp emerges. It stops the whitefly right in its tracks.
That's pretty brutal but effective. Is this something home gardeners can actually use?
Totally. You can buy them usually as pupa glued onto little cards. You just hang the cards up in the greenhouse.
Simple as that?
Pretty much. The adult wasps emerge and start hunting for whitefly larvae. You can also get them as loose pupas sometimes. For prevention, the recommendation is often to release a certain number per square meter regularly, like weekly or every couple of weeks.
And how do you know if it's working?
Yellow sticky traps are really useful. They help you monitor both the whitefly numbers and see if the parasitic wasps are active too.
Right, so you can track the populations. It really is a whole ecosystem management approach. Now, there was one last detail. Aunt Green was mixing something up herself.
Ah, yes. Kesser saw her getting ready with gardening gloves, some Castile soap, and intriguingly, a bottle of vodka next to a spray bottle.
Soap and vodka? What's that about?
It strongly suggests she was making a homemade insecticidal soap spray. It's a common DIY approach for soft-bodied insects. The soap disrupts their outer layer, and sometimes alcohol is added to increase effectiveness.
So a more traditional approach compared to the parasitic wasps.
Exactly. And the source notes that Kesser seemed more interested in the biological control ideas Glitter Fang had shared, hinting at maybe different philosophies there. We don't have Aunt Green's exact recipe, but it shows another common tactic.
Okay, so let's wrap up this deep dive. We started with Kesser and Steen, finding these little white flies in Aunt Green's greenhouse.
Right. And thanks to Glitter Fang's enthusiasm, they likely ID'd them as true whiteflies, learned about their life cycle, where they hang out.
And importantly, discovered they already had allies, like that lacewing, showing up naturally.
Yeah, and we explored that amazing plant communication, the group text, and the Wood Wide Web, and how Kesser and Steen's garden punk rock methods were actually fostering this beneficial mini-jungle alliance.
So hopefully you, our listener, now have a clearer picture of what was happening in that greenhouse and maybe some ideas about the wider ecological connections in any garden.
Definitely. It's a great case study in miniature ecology.
And that brings us to our final thought. Thinking about these interactions, the plant signals, the predator-prey relationships, the fungal networks, how might understanding these hidden connections on a larger scale in agriculture or conservation help us build more resilient, sustainable systems?
What other intricate relationships, these carbon highways or plant gossip networks, are operating unnoticed in your own backyard or local park, just waiting for us to tune in and understand them better?
It really makes you think about the complex web of life constantly unfolding, even in the most familiar places.